Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight it's open mic night, which means it's your chance to ask me any question that you like in order to help or have me help you on your property development journey. Now today I'm coming from my hotel room here in Melbourne, so please forgive the poor lighting and the bad background and the like, but I've got a cracking show ahead of you, some amazing questions here. And ready to get right into it. Now, if you would like to submit questions for me on an open mic night, these happen on the first Sunday of every single month. So if you click on the link below, so propdev.info/open-mic, submit your questions early. That allows me to do any preparation work that I might need in order to, prepare for and answer your questions. Now, the first question is quite a long question, and it's also quite a moving question, and it's come from Nuwan. And so please forgive me, folks. This one goes for a little while. So let me get into it. As I said, it is a little moving. First question says, Nuwan says, my life right now is a lot like a tough part of your story, Rob. I'm finishing up a long divorce. After 3 years of talks, I've decided to give my ex-partner our family home. This meant that giving up all the money from the house made over the last 13 years, I've earned and putting into the mortgage. I did this to protect my retirement savings. It hurts to lose that much, but I'm also glad my kids can stay in a home they know. Still, at the age of 42, I feel defeated and worried that I won't be able to leave anything for my kids, and that for my future won't be as good as I hoped. I've followed your journey, Rob, closely, and your rapid elimination method makes really good sense to me. And I even try to use it as a main idea in life, making quick, clear decisions to cut through things that don't work in my personal life, like dating and better results, getting better results faster. Now, I had never thought of using rapid elimination for dating, Nuwan, so that's a very interesting approach. I recently bought a new house, but I had to borrow a lot for it. So I have no extra money or equity in this house right now. This means that I can't easily use it to make more money. As a dad who's been through a divorce and seeing how well you've rebuilt your life, I have a big question for you. Since I'm starting again with very little saved and a new house that's fully mortgaged, what's the most important and perhaps hardest truth you would share with someone in my exact situation about property development? And would you be willing to teach your methods to a new student who likes to understand your strategy and driven to use the ideas, not just for property, but for a strong and good life for himself and his children? I'm ready for an honest advice and to do hard work. I truly believe I can learn the important lessons about property development. Nuwan, firstly, mate, very moving story. And as you touched on, I have been through very similar. As a matter of fact, I've been divorced twice. So that's not something I'm proud of, but it is something where I've learned some very hard lessons, both in myself and how I'm interacting in my relationships, but also in what I'm providing. Now, the first thing I'd like to say, mate, even though you've chosen to give your house up so your kids had somewhere to live, and you have a desire that you want to leave something for them, you actually already have. So it might be under the custodianship of your ex-wife at the moment, but I'm sure that she's going to look after your kids as well as you are going to. So don't think that you've lost in that regard, mate. That said, your question is all about how to rebuild your life, and I'm here to try and give you some insights that is truly possible. Now, understanding that you're starting with a very low base, that can make things a little trickier, but not impossible. Okay, so the thing is that, and I'm going to take you back to something that my year 6 teacher told me. Beryl Conversi, I know you're still alive. I know that you watch my shows from time to time, but what she told me way back when I was in year 6, she said, nothing is impossible. It just takes a little longer. And so when you're starting with little to no money, there are 7 different ways that you can actually make money through the property development process by adding value to the property, not by owning it, but by controlling it. And the hardest lesson that I learned, and that's your question to me, the hardest lesson that I learned was to not make it about me and not make it about my circumstances, but rather the person on the other side of the transaction, the vendor that we're buying the property from. They themselves have their own issues, their own challenges, their own problems, their own goals, and their own objectives in life. If we can make it about them, understand their circumstances and what they are trying to do with their next stage of life, then we can often rummage around in our toolbox and find the tool that will give them the outcome that they are looking for. Now, there's many tools in the toolbox. The problem is when we look at it from our objective, we only take one tool out of the toolbox because that's the one that we need, okay? So that's like having a hammer and then everything starts looking like a nail. Instead, let's look at their problems, and when we understand their problems, then we can then start to unravel that in order to get there. Now, very soon, I will be releasing the 7 no or low money down methods course, which is just a course on how to start in this. But for now, let me give you some teasers into that approach. Now, by making it about the vendor, there are fundamentally 4 key levers that we are needing to understand their position on. And when we can understand those 4 levers, that will then tell us the kind of solution we can actually put in front of them. So, lever number 1, time. Are they in a hurry or are they not in a hurry? Now, understanding their circumstances will give us some huge insights into what are the things that we can actually offer, okay? So by asking them leading questions, you're going to start to unravel that. So have you already bought the next place? What might be an open-ended question. And if they already have, then chances are they need this money to roll over and buy the next one, okay? But if they have not, then chances are they need time to find the next place. So then you're going to dive a little bit deeper into the thing and try and work out, well, how much time do they need? Are they in a hurry, etc. Now, the more time you've got at your disposal, the more of the 7 low or no money down strategies that you can start to open up. As the expression goes, time is money. And so if you can find a way of delaying the settlement process or the purchase process to a little bit later down the track, then that might minimize or avoid many of the holding costs that you might actually have, okay? So lots of different ways to do that. And I'm not going to go into every single one of them right now just for time reasons, but know that can be done. The next one is certainty. Okay, so from a contractual perspective, some people just want a clean contract. They don't want any conditions. They don't want any noise. They haven't transacted a property in a very long period of time. They don't want complexity in their life. They just want a contract that's easy to understand, no issues, no challenges. Okay. Now, other people are a little bit, they've transacted a lot of properties. They actually understand some of the nuances that we're actually trying to do in the property development process, and they might be interested in a more complicated contract. Okay, so there's lots of different kinds of contracts that have some complications. So special conditions, options contracts, delayed settlement with early access, all sorts of things like that. But that certainty lever, so we've got time and certainty, that certainty lever will tell you how complicated an offer you might actually put in front of them, okay? The next one is risk. So from a risk perspective, some people might want to put a little bit of risk on the line in order to profit from the process at the end. So are they willing to contribute some of their property or some of their proceeds into the journey and share the profits, but also share the risk of the deal? So share the rewards, share the risk, share the reward. Okay. So that's time, that's certainty, that's risk, and I'm having a brain fade on my 4th one. I should know that one off the top of my head. Money. Sorry. As crazy as that sounds, money. Now, as crazy as it sounds, you would think that everybody wants more money, but sometimes what they want and what they need are very, very, very different. So, for example, in that scenario where I said that person's already bought the next house, then what they need is just enough to buy the next house. Now, what they want is a lot more, but because they've got that time crunch, then that money element, they will quite often just take what they need, okay? Other times they've got delusions of grandeur of wanting some overly over-the-top type price points. So that might be something that might influence them from that perspective. Now, there might be also the nuances where there's a combination of both time and money. So, for example, they might have a short-term pressing need for some cash, but not all the cash. So let's just say, for example, that they're got a medical bill that they need to pay for, or maybe they're in arrears on their mortgage. So if we could give them, say, $50,000 in the short term, that might take away all their pressures, and that might buy time a little bit later on. So when you understand how they sit on those four levers: time, money, risk, and certainty, then you've got 7 different tools that you can start to rummage around in. So you've got options contracts, you've got delayed settlement with early access, you've got joint ventures, you've got other people's money, you've got, project management side of things. You've also got deal finding fees and a whole bunch of more. So a lot of different ways that you can actually make the money from the process. The key thing is that when you know where they sit on those, which one of those tools is the right tool for the job. So the big lesson that you asked for: take a curiosity about the other person in the transaction. If you can help them, then they are going to help you. Our job as property developers is to solve problems. So what is the problem that that vendor has, and how can we actually find a solution for it? Now, I can give you a real world example of this exact thing at play. So a recent deal that I did, property owner had a very large block of land, and they had a Shetland pony living in the backyard. And they hadn't yet found a new place to live, and it was taking them some time to find somewhere because they really needed somewhere for the Shetland pony to have to live. So what they wanted was the time to stay where they were with the Shetland pony in its current circumstances, whilst they took the time to find the next place. Now, I ended up getting 12 months delayed settlement with early access, the ability for me to actually go and, lodge all my development applications, get all my civils ready. I could even do some work on the property itself, removing an old asbestos-riddled shed and a couple of other things, remove some trees and that sort of thing, all while they were still owning the property. So that saved me a whole bunch of holding costs. I didn't have to pay interest or land tax or rates or a whole bunch more, which then made the profitability of my deal bigger, which meant that I had savings that I could pass back to them and pay a little bit more in that particular circumstance. And that was all about just listening to their needs, understanding their circumstances. That helped me with my cash flow. It meant that I could wait for money to come from another deal in order to push into this deal, so I could roll multiple projects at the same time. So that's the biggest lesson in life that I could say to you is don't make it about you, but instead make it about them. Hope that helps, Nuan. And know, mate, that it is possible. You won't find every single deal where you can negotiate deals like that, but know that there are enough deals out there. As a matter of fact, 80% of all development deals that we see presented as real deals in our community at our monthly meetups, 80% of those are some form of low or no money down. Now, if you've not been to one of our meetups before, mate, then best thing I can say, we run these all the way around the country: Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. If you click on the link below, then you can come to one of our events, see what's involved in the process, get to see others that are actually doing it, see how they've been able to successfully achieve in their world. So hopefully that helps immensely, Nuan, and thank you very much for, I guess, the very heartfelt question, mate. Okay, next question comes from Ray. Ray's a long-termer in our community. So, hey, Ray, how are you, mate? He says, this is a tricky question. Would you buy, taking into account that, I guess, the perspective of a developer and the developer, taking risks, would you buy your principal place of residence in your own name or as a corporate trustee in some form of trust type arrangement, taking into account risks, taxes, finances, etc.? Well, the first thing I'm going to say, Ray, is I can't give you legal advice here, okay? So this here is educational in nature. This is in no way, shape or form meant to be advice. And so all I can say is just some factors to start to consider. So as a property developer, we take risk as part of what we're doing. So there is a very significant chance that we are going to potentially have a roof that leaks or foundations that sink, not through any fault of ours, but maybe some workmanship of one of the contractors that we do, and there's a potential that we could actually be sued in the process. So asset protection is certainly an important factor to be thinking about. Now, if you've not yet bought a house, which sounds like you're in the process of doing right now, considering the entity that you're purchasing under is a really good time to do that. Okay, but there is a concept in the legal world called a person of substance and person of straw. So the person of substance is the one that owns all the assets and they take no risk. And the other person, the person of straw, is the one who takes all the risks and owns none of the assets. Now, in this instance, the person is a legal person. Okay, so it's not a human per se. It can be a human, but it could be a company, it could be a trust, it could be a trust with a corporate trustee. There could be lots of different entities. When they're saying a person, we're just talking about an entity of some description. Okay, so if you think about it from that perspective, you are the developer, and so you are the one taking risk. So having the asset not in your name makes a lot of sense if you can actually try to do that. Now, that said, it could be in your partner's name, okay? And so it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be in an entity as well, but then you have to start to think about, well, who controls that entity, and are you just overcomplicating the same thing? Okay. Now, from a entity's perspective, you can get advice from your accountant. They're going to give you really good tax advice, and you can get advice from your solicitor, and they're going to give you really good asset protection advice. You actually need both in this instance, okay? Because as you rightly touched on, if you own the asset for quite some time, then there might be some principal place of residence exemptions that you may want to tap into. Now, for me personally, I have gone down the route of putting it into a structure. I'm not going to mention what that structure is because I don't want to lead you down that path, but I got some great advice from both my accountant and my solicitor that complicates the process, but still allows me the ability to claim that as my principal place of residence with some small compromises along the way. It's whether or not you're willing to do those compromises in doing that. However, you equally don't need to make that overly complicated. As I touched on, you could put that in your partner's name and know that whilst it's in their particular name, know that family law will actually join that back together if for some reason in the future the two of you don't get along. Okay, so it's not advice, but other than to say you've picked the right time to be asking this question, and you need to get your advice from both your accountant and your solicitor. So my strong encouragement to go and do that, mate. But person of substance, person of straw. That's really the concept that you want to be talking to them about and say, look, I'm going to be taking risks in this property development process. How do I make sure that the assets that I own are protected moving forward in the unlikely but possible event that something does actually go wrong? Anyway, mate, hope that does help. And I guess good luck in that endeavor. Next question comes from Vincent. Vincent says, if I want to have a quick review of a potential project profit or loss, how can I be supported? Okay, Vincent, I'm not quite sure exactly what you mean, but it sounds like you're wanting to have somebody assist you in actually reviewing your project. Excuse me. Bit of a tickle in my throat. Now, a couple of different ways to do this, mate. So firstly, you could employ a project manager or a development manager with lots of experience in having done these deals. They could actually be running the deal on your behalf, and you would be paying a fee for them to do that service. So you'd be giving away some of your profits in that process. Second way you could do that is you could engage in communities like ours. You could actually come to our events. And you could run that. We run a masterminding process at the end of every single event, and you can ask your questions to the community, and you'll get some great advice. And sometimes that will be very, very specific and directed to your particular project with somebody with some great experience. Other instances, there might be less experience in that particular realm. So sometimes you're going to get fantastic outcomes, but the more you hang around that community, the more you're going to get to know which community members have got great results in the past and are qualified to give you good insights. Whereas there's other people who are like yourself very early in the journey, and they may not be as qualified to give you the advice. So you've got to, I guess, build your network of people around you that are going to be your support crew. The second thing you could do is you could partner with or joint venture with somebody who's done this kind of project for you before. That person could help you to actually run the project, and you might do that in some form of profit split arrangement where they're going to run the deal, bringing their skills, knowledge, and experience to the table, and you're going to I guess, learn through that process. The last way is you could actually get yourself some education and or mentoring as well. And then you've got somewhere where you can actually go and take your project, I guess, to, your mentor and actually ask them the different issues and challenges and problems as you go through the different process. Now, we do have a I guess, an education and mentoring program. It is called Property Development Formula. I'm not here to give you a sales pitch, just letting you know that it does exist. If you want to go to, I guess, the link below, propdev.info/PDF, that will take you to a page that will actually give you some insights into what we do and what we offer in that regard, okay? Now, it is an application-only process. If it is of interest, submit an application. We'd be more than happy to have a chat to you about how to do that. Now, all of those different ways, in some way, shape, or form, are going to cost you, okay? Or the last way would be that you just run the project yourself and try to learn as you go. Now, pretty much all of those are going to cost you something along the way. The question is, are you going to pay for that, I guess, through giving away profits in the deal? Are you going to pay for that through mistakes that you're going to make by not making the right outcomes? Are you going to pay for that up front from an education perspective? Some way, shape, or form, there's a cost associated with this. It just really comes down to you, your preferred learning method, your preferred level of engagement as to which way is going to be the best outcome for you. So hoping that helps, Vincent. Next question comes from Nikki, and Nikki says, in the month of May at the Brisbane meetup, there was a gentleman who presented The Real Deal, mentioned that they did an energy drop test. Have not heard of this before. Is it a quick test that can be done before engaging consultants to do electrical design? The reason why I ask is I engaged an electrical consultant to do the design for my 1:3 subdivision and paid for their fees, etc. To find out we did not need to do anything from the power grid, no upgrades, etc. Could we have done this energy drop test and save money and got our answers quicker? So Nikki, now without knowing exactly who you've engaged or what services that they have actually done, I don't think it's actually called an energy drop test, but it is a capacity management test. So it's load testing. So almost certainly what you've actually paid for is them to actually do that capacity management calculation. So they would be looking at what is the, I guess, the electrical energy available at that particular point. What is the other load that is actually happening in and around the area? They would have looked at the projected load of what you're actually going to be putting on there, would have done some calculations and says, is there any capacity needed? So you've paid for what I believe is exactly what you've asked for, which is the ability for them to actually determine whether or not that was required. Now, sometimes in your instance, no upgrade is needed. And if that's the case, lucky you, that's fantastic. And if you're doing only a 1:3, it's a high likelihood that you're actually going to be able to get by putting 3 extra properties in and not have to do an upgrade. Because if the system is that close to capacity that your 3 properties is going to trip it, then chances are they're needing to do upgrades in the area already. Now, if you're doing a 10 or a 20, the likelihood of you tripping that is much higher. And so it is a much more critical process to be actually doing. Now, that said, never say never. I have seen projects with only 3 or 4 properties that have required a pad mount transformer. And what they do at that point in time is they go, well, it's not just the capacity for your site, but it's the capacity that upgrade for the entire area that's needed at the time. So it can trigger some quite catastrophic results. And so what you've done by engaging with the electrical consultant up front is the right thing to get them to do the investigative works to both design the new layout and also understand the capacity management. So I think whilst you're looking for a specific test, it is almost highly likely that that what you've paid for is exactly that. So rest assured, I think that you've got a good outcome. Anyway, hope that helps. Next question is from Andre. Andre says, what is involved with setting up a body corporate, and what stage of development is this done, and what are the typical costs? Andre, that is a fantastic question. So the terminology changes from state to state. So it is known as a body corporate in some states. It's known as a strata in other states. Or a strata management plan. So depending upon where you are from a jurisdictional perspective, that will be different. Now, two different ways that you can actually do this. Number one, you can have your solicitor draw up the strata plan. And if you do that, it'll cost you anywhere between $3,000 and $5,000 typically to actually have that done. And then you would then hand that over to a strata management company. Now, the challenge with that approach is that unless your solicitor draws these up all day, every day, they probably aren't aware of all the issues, challenges, and problems that you're going to have under the Residential Tenancies Act of your particular state. And so sometimes there's going to be some things that slip through the cracks unless your solicitor is doing this on a regular, consistent basis. But you can find solicitors that do specialize in putting those strata management plans together. The other approach is to find a strata manager who you believe is actually going to be running the property once it's actually constructed. And in many instances, they will actually give you a free copy of the strata plan or a free copy of the body corporate on the condition that they get the initial strata management services once the titles have been created. Now, this is a common approach that a lot of the strata managers out there do there. So they will subsidize that work for you and give you that for free. They are experts in that area because they are running the stratas all the time. They're very, very familiar with the Residential Tenancies Act that you're in. Now, the reason why they do that is if they are in the incumbent position of being the strata manager at the start, at the next annual general meeting, when they, take votes to the committee, they are the ones in charge of whether they vote themselves out. And so whilst the committee needs to vote on that, unless nobody raises that, so if they do a good job, there'd be no particular reason why somebody would want to vote them out. So in many instances, just by buying that first engagement, they might get anywhere from 5 to 10 years worth of ongoing fees and services for running the body corporate from then on. So it's a very common strategy that they will do. I particularly use that second approach. Do your research on who is the best body corporate manager, especially if you are wanting to keep some of the stock at the end and you're going to need that person to be managing your strata plan. You want to make sure that they are, a good and reputable company. So do your research on those beforehand. Anyway, Andre, I hope that helps. Next question comes from Martin. Martin says, hi, Rob. Thank you for answering all our questions on Open Mic Night. Much appreciated. More than welcome, mate. My strategy is to purchase a block of 6 units on one title, do a strata title to separate the titles, renovate and sell 5 and keep 1 for free. Does that sound familiar? ? Yes, it does, but that's not quite what I say, and I'll touch on that in a sec. I don't have enough cash to purchase the block with a 30% deposit. Is there a no or low money down strategy that would work in this particular scenario? So firstly, Martin, let me address the approach that you're doing first. So firstly, buying a property in one title, so 6 units on one title, there's not a lot of those around. Now, typically that was only done when the developer of the day intended to keep all of them for themselves and I guess profit from the rent as they go. It was very common in the 70s and 80s, and so there's a lot of older developments that did exist in that one title. Okay, and so what you would be doing is carving those up and putting them and selling them individually. Now, there will be an uplift in doing that, okay? But to do that, there's a couple of things you need to make sure. So firstly, you're going to need to make sure that each property is got its own services, so its own individual water meter, its own individual electrical meter, its own sewer connection into I guess the main within the lot and that sort of thing. So sometimes this can be very cheap to do, sometimes it can be very expensive. You may have to do some upgrades to the building in order to get fire compliance and a number of other things up to code in order to do that. Now, the strategy that you said was that you wanted to renovate 5, sell 1, and keep 1 free and clear. I'm not sure that you're going to get the level of profits that you're thinking out of doing a strata title in order to get that. Now, what you're talking about is the concept that I teach, which is if you've got a 20% profit on cost, then if the magic number is 6, if you can build 6, sell 5, keep 1, then you'll keep 1 for free, okay? The challenge here is that the profit on cost probably won't get to that 20% mark because a strata title is not going to typically give you that 20% uplift that you're actually looking for. Now, it'll still give you an uplift and it still will give you some nice profits if you found the right property. But the timeline is much, much, much compressed. And so the speed and velocity of money is really what you're looking for something like this. And so you may not get that 20% return. Something like a 10 or 12% return might be, I guess, a perfectly acceptable outcome if you can turn these over in, say, 3 months, for example, okay? Because they don't need to be a super complicated deal. Now, back to your question. Your question was, you don't have enough cash to purchase the block with your 30% deposit. And then you said, is there a no or low money down strategy that will help? Now, I had a very, very, detailed response to Nuan earlier in the show, talking about his particular circumstances with no or low money down. And what I said to him is the same I'm going to say to you, which is don't make it about you, but instead make it about the vendor. What is the vendor's dilemma? What is the vendor looking for in this particular circumstance? How can you help them in order for them to be able to help you? Now, what you might be able to do is, and I don't know their particular circumstances, but you might be able to do something like a delayed settlement with early access, for example, where by delaying the purchase, you have some holding cost savings, and then you can pass those savings back. So an interest rate saving, for example, might be an interest rate saving of 6 months. So not knowing that the purchase price of the property, but let's just say it's $5 million, then at a 6.5% interest rate for 6 months, what is the saving that's actually going to achieve? What are the rate savings that you're actually going to achieve? What is the land tax saving that you're actually going to achieve in that timeline? And can you offer more for the property later on if they let you come in and do the renovation works now before you actually purchase? So your overall project costs won't change, but your cash flow situation will. Now, if that's the case, you may be able to sell the finished product as a fully renovated property and have the incoming cash be used as part of the settlement of the original property in the first place. So that's probably the one that comes to mind, I guess, the most. Otherwise, I guess you might need investors into your deal in order to come up with that deposit if you don't have something like that. Be mindful that there are some ASIC compliance issues if you are raising money. Please be extraordinarily careful in that regard. Watch this space. We're going to be talking about a new equity fund coming to I guess our Development Sites Australia brand very, very soon to help with projects like that, assuming that the profitability is there, and that is that fund would invest into the deal. And as an investor in the deal, they would then be I guess, like you, sharing the risk and hence sharing the reward of the project. So watch this space. It is coming soon, and we'll talk about that more once it is fully alive. So hoping that helps, Martin. Next question comes from Tim, and I'm just mindful I'm on a laptop here, and I wasn't sure if I was going to run out of battery, but I think I should be fine. Next question comes from Tim. Tim says, if I purchase a site with an existing dwelling and then construct an additional 2 dwellings on the site so that there are 3 dwellings in total, and subsequently strata title them individually, then hold all 3 for more than 5 years before selling, would that likely be the result of a sale being outside the scope of GST and any profit being subject to capital gains tax only? Then in brackets, he's kindly said, this is a general inquiry only and not intended as to constitute tax or legal advice. I'm just trying to understand the principles and would welcome any thoughts or references you've come across in your experience. Now, despite the fact that you've put a disclaimer in there, Tim, I also need to put a disclaimer, mate, because this, I guess, I can't legally give you advice, okay? So you have to be extraordinarily careful here in this regard. So this is educational in nature and not advice, but I'm going to give you some insights into what to go and ask your solicitor and your accountant, most likely in this instance, your accountant, okay? So firstly, the ATO is very much about intent. So what is your intent? Are you an investor or are you a developer? Now, if you're an investor, then you are going to have a long-term hold on your property. And as a long-term hold on the property, then capital gains tax would be likely the outcome they're actually looking for. If you are a developer, then you're running a business and you're turning that over very, very, very quickly, and you're trying to profit from the process through the property development process, and hence that would be a GST type event. Now, if your intention is to develop and hold, that's where it gets a little bit grey, okay? And you mentioned the 5-year mark, okay? That is typically the test that the ATO provides to say, is your intention to really hold it, or is your intention to really turn it over as a property development, okay? So you need to be very, very clear that you have some very specific questions that you take to your accountant, and be very clear with your intentions. What is my intention? Capture your intentions in writing so it is very clear what you're actually trying to do, because at some point in the future, if for some reason your circumstances change, which can happen from time to time, then you want to make sure that your intentions were captured correctly, because that might be impactful if you do get an ATO audit or anything along those lines, okay? But you've touched on the right number. My understanding is 5 years. I could be wrong, maybe it's 6. But once you've reached that threshold, then the ATO has said, actually, you have proven that you've held it long enough. It does indicate that you are an investor and not a developer. Now, all of that said, my guidance to you, my friend, is have a start to think about, are you a property developer or are you an investor? Now, if you're a property developer, then the other thing that you're wanting to think about, other than, I guess, the GST side of things and the capital gains tax side of things, is the velocity of your money. Okay, so you want to start to do a calculation to say, if I did this and turned it over super fast, and sold it straight away, yes, I might pay some GST in doing that, but then I can reload my money and go and do another project. Or if I do hold it, then I've got an opportunity cost with that money that because it's stuck and trapped in that particular deal, I might get some capital growth out of that, but then I've got the tax at the end. So do the math between the two and go, and then take a hard look at yourself and say, well, do I want to be the person that's working hard and turning it over really fast, or do I want to be the person that takes, I guess, the gradual approach? I'm going to do a development, but hold for some period of time, and maybe just let the market do the work. Now, if you're letting the market do the work, you're at the mercy of the market. You don't know whether the market's going to go up or down or sideways or anything like that in that time. So it does become a little bit more speculative the longer you actually hold it. Now, in theory, when you hold a property long enough, it's meant to double in value every 7 to 10 years. That's the rhetoric. But that doesn't happen everywhere, doesn't happen all the time, doesn't happen in every situation. So you want to do a whole bunch of homework on is this the right area where I think there's actually going to be some capital growth actually coming to me? So be extraordinarily careful in doing that, Tim, because I guess there can be some challenges here. Either way, when you talk to your accountant, I guess they may need to get an ATO private ruling on your behalf, given your particular circumstances, once they know exactly what your circumstances are going to be. So hope that helps, my friend. Next one comes from G. G says, I'm considering purchasing a 1982 built duplex in the current market that will require financing. Sorry. I'm interested to know what's happening in the market now and for the rest of the year. And I have 7 specific questions. Oh my goodness. 7 questions. So hoping you guys can't hear the fire brigade and everything going past. 7 questions. So I'm just going to rattle the questions off. Is it a time to take huge risks or double down on zero risk deals? Is it going to be difficult to get bank funding for builders or buyers? Is it more important than ever to ensure asset isolation, asset protection? Is the market crashing slowly or rising slowly? Are buyers retreating or getting fired up again? Is the conventional resi purchase too risky for flipping in the short periods? Where is the smart money going? And is finance leverage favored? Gee, that is a very, very, very long and complicated question, and I'm going to just try and cut that down and simplify it. What it sounds like is you are an investor and not a developer. And so the way an investor looks at things is very, very different to how a developer looks at things. Okay. So from an investor's perspective, you want to be looking at the long-term capital growth of these particular properties and what value you can add. So if you're buying a 1982 property, then you've got to look at, can I do some sort of facelift on that and uplift the value in some way, shape or form, plus what sort of capital growth is actually going to happen in that side of things. Now, when you're doing that, you want to be understanding where the market is and also where the market is going. So right now, interest rates are slowly starting to drop, which means that people are starting to get back into the market, which means that interest is actually coming back into the market, which means that pretty soon house prices are going to start to rise relatively significantly as more people can afford to purchase more properties. So as that happens, there is a huge supply and demand mismatch at the moment. There's lots of demand and hardly any supply. And as housing affordability starts to come back with interest rates, that's going to push property prices up. So there is, I think, in my humble opinion, I think there is going to be some capital growth start to happen in the area. Okay. That said, I touched on this on the previous question. Velocity of money. So if your money is trapped in that particular property, that means there's only one deal that you're able to do with that one lot of cash. Whereas if you did a property development and you, I guess, even on that one deal, do you do the reno and flip it and get back into the market really quick? You'll make some money, reload and jump back in again. So if you're willing to work hard, it is possible to make more money in that same timeline that you're waiting for the property to actually double in value. But you will have to work a little harder in the property development space. Property development space is a much shorter timeline. So we work hard, force value onto the property, and then we, I guess, manufacture our uplift in that regard. Whereas an investor is relying on the market to do the heavy lifting for them, and they sit back. Once they've made the purchase, they sit back and let the market do the work. So I guess depending upon which approach that you're wanting to take. Now, in my humble opinion, I think that the market is going to start to go up based on the supply and demand. Now, that is very specific to particular areas because there are markets within markets within markets. So I'm talking very generically here across the entire country. So it's important that you understand the dynamics in your local area. Okay, so what is happening in your region? Is there enough demand happening? What is the population growth starting to happen in the area? who's coming there, how many people, what's the timeline that they're actually coming, all those sorts of things. They're going to give you some great insights into the process and what's happening. Anyway, hoping that helps you on your property development journey. Now, that said, folks, that's the end of today. If you have any questions for next month, we run these on the first Sunday of every single month. Click on the link below, propdev.info/open-mic, and that gives me the time to do the preparation in order to run these events and answer all of your questions. Now, if you've got a more burning question, then why don't you come to one of our monthly meetups? We run, when I say monthly, we actually run them weekly, but we run them monthly in each location. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We are trying really hard to get to Perth, folks. We haven't forgotten you in Perth. We're on our way. There's just quite a bit of work that needs to happen in order for us to get there. So we run them physically, so you can actually turn up to these things. We have industry experts talking about different issues and challenges, so town planners, civil engineers, architects, and the like. We have members of our community sharing real deals, so the good, the bad, and the ugly of a project, so you can learn from what they've done. Then we do some masterminding, and the masterminding is where you can come and get your property questions answered by the community. So we're going to get the power of the community actually helping you on your property development journey. Then we kick on socially afterwards and have a few beverages and head out to dinner in most of the places that we go to. So it is a great event. So please, 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 why don't you come to one of those? Till then, folks, I'm going to say thank you very much. Hope you got plenty out of this. We'll see you next time on our next session. Till then, bye for now. Bye.